About 1 in 3 Americans between 18 and 34 years old live with their parents.
And while you may have heard more about this recently, this trend isn't new.
Between 2005 and 2015, the share just grew very steeply over this 10-year.
This 18 to 34, I think this is not a good number because I would assume, you graduate from high school at 18. So if you're going to college, how would you, classify that? Say, for example, my son is right now a first year college student. So if he's going to a local college, say a community college or a local university, then he would most likely be staying with his parents, right? But in my case, my son is going to a different university, like a different out-of-state university. So technically, he's not living with me, but I am still paying for all his, pretty much I'm paying for everything right now, right? His tuition, his lodging, boarding. If these guys had done a 25 to 35-year-old, I think that number would have made a lot more sense. The other thing that I find interesting is that the percentage of men who are living with their parents is much higher. So if we look at 1984, 34% men were still living with their parents, whereas women were little over 24%. So that's interesting. You would think men are more independent and they would likely, leave their parents' house and go live with, go live by themselves. But apparently that's not the case. One reason could be that at least back in 1980s, women were getting married earlier, right? So they would move out, live with their husbands, and so that might explain why the percentage for women is low. And it's interesting because this percentage, like for men 34, it did drop to around 32, and then it stayed stagnant until almost 2004 for both men and women, and after that it has gone up.
Period. Since then, it's been fairly stable. There was an uptick, of course, during the pandemic. In the wake of the pandemic, those rates of parental co-residence are now about where they were right before. Part of the reason we see this escalation of young adults not leaving the nest or returning to the nest is this idea that it was harder and harder for them to weather shocks.
Nearly 30% of Gen Z said they would like to save, but don't make enough money. And roughly 2 in 5 millennials and Gen Z adults feel it's harder to build financial wealth now than when their parents were their age because of the economy. 27-year-old Victoria Franklin has been living with her mother in New Jersey since she graduated college in 2019.
I saw all of the money that I was saving, and I thought, maybe I should stay home for a little bit, and I didn't feel an urgency to move out.
Not everyone is enthusiastic about this trend.
You guys are making 6 figures together. You can't tell me you can't afford a house.
That's a textbook Karen. Even her hairstyle and the dress, wow. That is a textbook Karen.
They just don't want to spend their money.
36% of Americans said in a 2022 survey that more young adults living with their parents is bad for society. So
this is a massive house. So if your parents have such a big house, then yeah, if you have a local job in that city, why wouldn't you not live with your parents? And by the way, I have a friend. His son, he's doing really well. He got his bachelor's in computer science and he's working in one of the FANG companies. So he's making a high 6-figure income. But he lives with his parents. He's pretty much saving like 90% of his salary he's saving. So in the last 3 or 4 years, he saved enough that he was able to then buy his parents a bigger house. So they moved out to a much bigger house and most of the money came from his son because the parents were working in a very ordinary government job. So they were not making that much money. So the son, because he's working in one of these top FANG companies and he's making high 6-figure, saving 90% of his salary, something interesting comes to my mind, and I think this is a cultural thing. So obviously I am from India, right? I've been living here for the last 25 years or so in America, but I grew up in India. And in India, the idea that you live with your parents, that's not considered a taboo. That's something which is more, prevalent in Western societies where you are expected to leave your home after you turn 18. I kind of find it funny because at 18, you are not really an adult. Yeah, technically they say you are an adult, but no, you're not. You are still a kid. What the hell do you know when you are 18? When I was 18, I was, if I looking back, I think when I was 18, I was a complete moron. I'm a complete moron even now. I'm approaching 50, but that's besides the point. So I think this idea that you have to absolutely leave your parents' house the moment you turn 18, I think that's stupid. Just her mother living alone in this house, then why not stay with her mother, right? That's a smart thing. She can save most of her, salary and she can then use that money to buy a house later down the road.
Well, here's why young Americans are choosing to live with their parents and what the implications are for the U.S. economy.
My name is Victoria Franklin. I am 27 years old and I live in my childhood home with my mother and my boyfriend.
This is a really nice big ass home. I can see these nice trees here. She has a nice backyard. Yeah, why not? If you can save money, sure, as long as her mother doesn't have a problem. And why should she, right? Unless they have a bad relationship, like the mother would probably want company, especially since they are not talking about the dad. So I'm assuming that she's either divorced or, maybe the dad is not there. So yeah, I think this is an arrangement which probably will work for everyone.
Victoria graduated from the University of Miami in 2019 and moved in with her mom when she was looking for a job.
Look at the house, man. What a nice house. They even have this extra space, shed or something. Nice front yard, and I'm assuming they have a nice backyard also, bunch of trees. This is a beautiful home. So this is obviously a well-off family. At least the mother is, I don't know what she was doing, but she has she has a good house, so she probably has good saving also. So yeah, this girl is doing the right thing. Instead of living in some shady one-bedroom apartment and spending 80% of your salary in just grocery and rent, it's better that you live with your parents and save some money so that in the future you can move to a better house.
After I saw the cost of living and things like that after I graduated, that maybe I'd be home for about a year.
More than half of Gen Z adults say they don't make enough money to live the life they want due to high cost of living.
I ended up bartending and waitressing until October, where I got my first offer, so it did take a little bit longer than I expected. Currently live at the Jersey Shore, and I was commuting into New York City, which takes about 2 hours each way. And
that's pretty bad. Commuting from Jersey Shore to New York City, that would suck.
Thought, in 6 months or so, I'll move into the city, be closer to the job, and the pandemic threw a wrench in those plans.
Okay.
Victoria now works a fully remote job.
Oh, that's perfect. So she's fully remote. Yeah, then that's exactly the same situation as, the family I told you, right? One of my friends whose son is also fully remote, working for a FANG company, making shitload of money and saving almost 90% of his income. So yeah, this is a hack. I would say, the taboo that you should leave your parents' house after 18, I think that's bullshit. If anybody who is young who is watching this video, I would say don't do that. If you have a good relationship with your parents, obviously if your parents are assholes or if you have a very toxic relationship, yeah, then maybe you should get out. But assuming you have a good relationship with your parents, there is nothing wrong in staying longer, right? This is not a taboo. This is just a cultural thing, and this is more of a Western thing. I'm telling you, people in India and in other Southeast Asian countries, this is not considered a taboo. People live with their parents for much longer if they feel like living. Sometimes they don't, but it's definitely not considered bad if you're living with your parents. It's not like you are a loser if you are living in your parents' house. So that mentality, I think that is an obsolete way of thinking, and especially with the crazy housing prices these days. And I feel bad for Gen Z and young adults because it's fucked up. I got very lucky when I purchased my first house. Now obviously I came here as an immigrant, I came here as a student. Things lined up perfectly for me because when I started working and I started making good money, right after that the housing market crashed. And I had been renting all along, so it didn't affect me. And when I was ready to buy my house, the housing market had hit the rock bottom. So I bought my house in 2011, and my house is now worth more than 3 times what I paid for in 2011. So in the last 15 years, its value has tripled. And I also ended up getting a very low mortgage, and I was smart enough to get a 30-year fixed mortgage rate. So I didn't want to get the variable APR business. So I just got a 2.1% 30-year fixed mortgage, and my house is now worth 3 times more, and the mortgage rates are also at least 3 times more. So 3 times 3, that means the monthly payment is now 9 times more than what I am paying. If you are a young adult and if I cannot imagine buying this house where I'm living today. Things are insane. So I feel bad for the younger generation. Things are fucked up. That's why you should not be slave to this mentality that, I need to leave my parents' home, otherwise people will call me a loser. Now don't think like that. Try to figure out ways you can save money early on. If you can live with your parents, live with your parents, right? If you have good relationship, cultivate that relationship, right? There's nothing bad about that. Stay with your parents, save money, and then move later down the road. You can always move out and live independently when you are ready to start your own family and when you are ready to make bigger decisions.
which she says she probably wouldn't have if it weren't for the pandemic. Without a commute to worry about, she was able to stay at her mom's for longer.
It's a lot harder for young people today to save up for, markers of the American dream than it was for previous generations. Part of the reason we see this escalation of young adults not leaving the nest or returning to the nest is this idea that it was harder and harder for them to weather shocks. And so, for example, if they suffered a layoff or they suffer some sort of health shock or they got in a car accident, if they didn't have any additional credit to weather that shock, they would end up moving back home. The financial stability of young adults, their ability to pay for things if they got into an emergency, was one of the big factors influencing whether or not they were living on their own or living with their parents.
A significant number of Gen Z adults and millennials lack emergency savings. In fact, 46% of millennials and 32% of Gen Z have more credit card debt than emergency savings.
See, the problem here is that there is no universal health care. Your health benefits are tied to your job. If you lose your job, you lose your health benefits. And ironically, health benefits are something that probably you need more when you lose your job. Things usually are not good when you lose your job. So the last thing you want is to also lose your health coverage. And I don't think it's going to change. Now, with the new administration, with Trump getting elected, it's quite likely that he might even knock out Obamacare. So whatever options people had before with respect to affordable healthcare, even that might be gone. This is sad. People then put purchases on their credit card, and then credit cards are insane 20-25% interest rates. So once you get stuck in credit card debt, you are fucked.
This can have ramifications for setting up a financial future.
This is a nice locality. Look at all these houses.
Roughly 1 in 4 Gen Z adults say housing costs are one of the biggest challenges to financial success.
Obviously.
The prices of homes has escalated over the last few decades much faster than actual incomes.
Yeah, it is true. In the last 15 years, my salary did not triple. Inflation has gone up, but not at the rate at which the housing price has gone up. My house is now 3 times. And the house is a big investment, right? So if it's a $500,000 house, it's $1.5 million, right? I'm just throwing numbers, just to give an idea. But yeah, that $500,000, maybe it is affordable, but $1.5 million, suddenly it's way out of your budget. So housing prices are completely insane. And interestingly, when the pandemic hit, when people started moving out of, San Francisco and Bay Area, and people started moving out to suburbs and sometimes out of state, right? I know some people who left California and went to other states because it was cheaper and they could buy a bigger house there and work remotely. At that time, I thought that maybe this will pop the bubble and the insane housing prices, there will be a correction, because I think, people, we have hit the tipping point, and now nobody can afford to buy these expensive houses, especially in San Francisco and New York City. But that didn't happen, right? Now look at the prices. The prices are back to where they were. And in fact, companies are now calling employees to come back. Fully remote job is also less and less remote.
So it is actually much harder for a millennial or a Gen Z to save up for a down payment to buy a home. And that's something that bears out in the data.
The pandemic did have a lot to do with it. I saw how much I was saving and I was like, maybe I shouldn't be paying, upwards of $3,000 a month and making somebody else richer when I could stay at home, save that money, and spend it on where I want to spend it. Between my job and my bartending and waitressing, I make anywhere from $85,000 to $95,000 a year. I would say about 40 to 50% of my salary is going right into savings. My mentality is why rent and give my money to someone else when I can start to own? And so a big chunk of that money is going to go towards a down payment on a house.
Young adults ages 25 to 34 in high cost of living areas are more likely to live with their parents. Nearly 26% of young adults in New Jersey were living with at least one of their parents in 2022. The median household income in Oceanport, New Jersey, where the Franklins live, was nearly $133,000 in 2022, while the median value of a home in the region was around $644,000.
My dad built this house for $350,000.
$350,000. That house here in California would be worth like $3 million at least.
And was making probably $10,000 to $15,000 less than I was. My mom wasn't working at the time, and they were able to afford a $350,000 house on a $70,000 a year salary with a son. And that's not even the American dream anymore. That's not even possible. My aunt, who I fight with all the time, is always saying how you have to give somewhere, right? And my cousin said something to her the other day and said, we're giving everywhere. We don't get property. We don't get good school systems. Whatever we're trading off is too much to trade off.
Victoria had brought up some conflict with her aunt a few times.
Oh, that Karen.
Oh, this is my Aunt Judy.
And Karen.
So I asked Aunt Judy to come on over and talk to us.
I talked about how much we fight about millennials, yes, but millennials living at home.
And she's
and
driving
how
a big ass truck.
you always say, well, you have to sacrifice something, but how much we're sacrificing. Like, we don't get like a big property, or we don't get like a nice house, or it's not in a good school system.
But you have to start somewhere. You have to start anywhere. Just start your portfolio is what I told you. I don't care what it is. You don't have to live in Oceanport your first time.
No, but you were able to live in Oceanport the first time.
Okay, I guess it was different times.
Gen X and baby boomers may have a tougher time understanding what young adults are going through today because they enjoyed, until the pandemic recession hit, a solid almost 15 years of uninterrupted economic expansion. Baby boomers, Gen X, they weathered many economic downturns, including major recessions. But I think the big difference is that when they were starting to form their own households and starting to accumulate wealth, housing and higher ed were both more affordable relative to their incomes than they are now.
When I started out, I was making $35,000 a year. That was nothing. And he was making $35,000 a year. You guys are making six figures together. You can't tell me you can't afford a house. They just don't want to spend their money.
Told ya.
I'm sorry.
No, I don't know.
Did you want it? What was my first house? 250 maybe? 270?
That doesn't exist anymore. Where am I finding a $270,000
I'm
house?
not making $35,000 a year. Combined, we made 70.
In 1995, $70,000 was the equivalent of $145,000 today.
Look at that.
See, this is confident idiot, right? They're very confident, but they are also morons. I made 35K. I was able to buy a house in 1985. Well, dumbass, we are not living in 1985. Even I can say that, hey, I bought a house in 2011. Well, I got lucky. So, at least I recognize that I got lucky. And the current generation, they may not be as lucky. My son may not be as lucky, but he's welcome to stay with me, right? I will help him out in that way. He can stay here with me, and when he starts working, maybe he can work remotely and save some money, and that way things can work out. This kind of mindset, this Karen here, that I did this, I bought my house when I was making 35K, so why can't you? Well, because you're a moron.
See?
We do also have a situation that what is really good for an individual person or an individual family is not necessarily good for the entire macroeconomy.
The Federal Reserve estimates in a 2019 paper that young adults who move out of their parents' house would spend around $13,000 more per year on things such as housing, food, and transportation.
One of the big boosts to consumer spending is when people form households. Whether you're a renter or a buyer, you need to furnish that house. You need to fix things up in the home to make it livable. You end up spending a lot of money during that time. So if the pace of household formation slows down, then that's going to slow down the pace of consumer spending, and that will produce a drag on the economy.
Another issue is that there aren't enough affordable properties in popular areas for younger people who are in entry-level jobs and making less money.
Any sort of housing policy needs to be multi-pronged. Are there homes that are at the price point of these prospective home buyers? What can we do to increase the housing supply? What can we do to build? What can we do to help elder Americans, to help them downsize and move into more right-sized homes that will open up larger homes for young families?
One thing they can do is to prevent these corporations and people who buy multiple homes as investment properties. I think they should put a cap on that. So I know this because here in California, I know a lot of homes, they are making a lot of new homes here. So it's not like there is shortage of homes. There is a lot of construction happening in this area. But most of the houses that are selling, people who are buying, this is not their first home. They are buying their second home or their third home. And a couple of years back during pandemic, there were these corporations who were just swallowing all these individual homes, and they were not buying these homes because some person would live there. They were buying these homes for rental properties or for Airbnb and stuff like that. So I think if they pass a law to make that illegal, that I think will solve the problem to a large extent. Give preference to first-time home buyers, give preference to people who are going to live in that house, incentivize these people. You can incentivize them by either giving some massive tax break or some kind of tax credit to these people, or you can give them a special mortgage loans. They have to pay less interest rate, and anybody who is investing, who is buying homes for investment purpose, tax these people, tax their asses off. These are all multi-millionaires and they have enough cash lying around, so they're like, oh, let's just go buy a home, right? And as a result, some young family family who wants to move into a house, they cannot because these rich assholes are buying all these houses. So I would say incentivize first-time home buyers, give them huge tax credit, tax benefit, and people who are buying homes, second, third, fourth investment property, you tax the fuck out of these people. Corporations should not even be allowed to buy a family home. If you are buying a home, you need to show that you are going to live in that home, and some faceless, nameless corporation should not be allowed to buy any homes. If they just do that, I think this will significantly make the problem. It won't fully solve it, but it's going to make things much better.
So I think one alone is not really going to do it. We've got to look both at demand as well as supply.
The other major factor here is how much student loan debt young Americans have. 59% of US adults say they've delayed financial milestones because of their student debt.
I do have a student loan payment. It's about $480 a month. So that's my largest expense.
The liability could be worse for Black borrowers, who tend to have higher than average student loan debt and less wealth than white counterparts. Black and Hispanic respondents were more likely to say that debt was holding them back from reaching financial milestones. Less than half of white respondents said the same.
The amount of debt young adults held also rose substantially between 2005 and 2014, during that period of strong escalation in that cohort living with their parents.
Aggregate student loans are such an enormous part of the economy now, and that's not a reflection of younger people making bad choices with their education. It's really a consequence in large part due to the fact that there's less public funding and going to college just is more expensive, which makes it even harder for even those college grads who are hoping to get earning more money as a result of their college degrees.
Yeah, this is another problem here in US. So countries like Germany, France, you can go and get a higher education and you have to pay very little, or sometimes it's completely free because it comes out of the system. The tax from the income tax and from the corporate tax and all that funds the education. That's not the case here, and I don't think that will ever be the case in America. But if it was just that, okay, the college is not free, you have to pay, but the tuition fee is reasonable, which is how it used to be back in 70s, 80s. But now the college tuition fee is out of whack. It's just insane. So I have 2 kids and my son is going to college, and somehow I'm figuring out a way to fund his college. But my daughter, will be ready to go to college, she's still in middle school, but whenever she's ready, it's not going to be easy for me to fund her college, because the way the college tuition fee is going up, I won't be surprised that by the time she's ready to go to college, it would have gone up by 30, 40, even 50%. So the rate at which the college tuition fee is going up is insane. And I wonder, when is the tipping point going to be reached? Because this is not sustainable. If the college expenses, if the college tuition fee and the price of home, if both these things keep going up, they can't just go up endlessly, right? At some point, something has to give. There will be a breaking point, right? When nobody can afford to go to college or nobody can afford to buy a home, then what will happen? This is going to break the back of middle class.
Loan debt by itself can't explain the phenomenon, especially considering so many European countries with much less student loan debt have higher rates of young adults living with their parents.
24 out of 29 European countries.
So some of this is cultural, I would say, right? In some countries, kids like to stay with their parents for longer. So it's not just financial, it's also cultural. In America, there is this weird perception that if you are staying with your parents after you are 18, you are some kind of a loser. You have to leave your parents' home, which does not make sense. Like I said, right? If your parents are assholes or if they are toxic people and you want to get them out of your life, then I understand. But not everybody has to leave their parents' home just because that's what society thinks you should do. I think that's not the right way to live.
Countries had more 18 to 34-year-olds living with their parents in 2021 than the US. It was over 70% in Italy, Portugal, Greece, Serbia, and Croatia.
My boyfriend is Brazilian, and multi-generational homes are very common in almost everywhere else in the world, except in the United States. So I'm just taking a page of their playbook.
The Americans are probably the only people that they're not multi-generations in one house. And I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I think it's kind of nice. Why do we have to be so cold to push everybody out?
There are a lot of cultures out there in which
So this girl is lucky.
until you get married. And I don't think there's necessarily an economic explanation for that.
I think this girl is lucky. She has a good mother.
Franklins would say in the US, it is the economy, but Victoria's mom is kind of okay with it.
Unfortunately, it is the economy and the world that we live in that just doesn't allow them to go live a comfortable life. So with them living here was no big deal. It's not really a problem.
Good for her. I like this mom. And she has a big house, so that's added bonus. So I think this girl will do fine.
Saving their money, eventually they'll buy a house, and that works.
So as an immigrant who grew up in India and moved to America, and now that my kids are, my son is in college, and one day they will all move out, I wonder about how things will be. This cannot just keep going up forever. At some point, we will reach a breaking point, and after that, I don't know what will happen. We might have a French Revolution kind of situation where there is a class warfare, because if lower middle class, and poor people, if they keep getting shafted like the way we are getting shafted, I don't know how people can survive. Anyway, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.